everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh my. I'm going to tell you something else. You know what? Here's the deal, folks. We have been doing business one way for centuries. I feel like we have been, right? And then some book comes along. Well, actually, this woman comes along, and she writes this, what I think is a groundbreaking book, right? And I have never said that on this show. I've never. We have done business books before, but I think this one is groundbreaking. And I'll tell you why. It's because this book challenged me, and I told her this before we got on there. This book challenged me to rethink about how we're doing business. You know, typically we do business from a hierarchy, right? We have this pyramid of how we do business. But what if that was all eliminated? What if we were truly free at work? What if we literally, every one of us, were both individuals and yet part of the collective? Where not only did you matter as a person, but what you mattered to the group becomes even more powerful. What if that happened? What if you felt absolute freedom, right, to choose what your day was going to be like and how you could best be productive? And what if you could do that collectively? That is what freedom at work is, and that is what my guest, Traci Fenton, has written. And I think it's groundbreaking because it's such a challenge to our mindset and our thought process. And it's going to challenge you today. So if you're ready to be challenged, then you're in for quite a treat. I'm just telling you that right now. But before we get to her, which we always do, we do every week, right? We walk you through the 4 areas of your life. Look, here's the deal. We are 4-part people. We are physical, mental, emotional, spiritual people. And, you know, I say the same things a lot every week, and I get challenged to say something different. I'm going to say something different, a little different anyway. Here's the deal. Because we're 4-part people, right, we need to be constantly working on ourselves every day in some area, right? In these 4 areas, in some way. But the truth of the matter is I started to realize my purpose in life. And part of my purpose is to keep people from dying. Because here's and you say, that's weird. Let's hear me out. You know, if we're physical, mental, emotional, spiritual people, and we need to be working ourselves every day, when we don't, right, we don't stay still. Because if we're not growing, we're dying. That's just the truth, because you cannot stay stagnant. You cannot stay the same. And it becomes important for us to realize that we have got to work on our growth, wherever we're at, wherever that part is. So when I go through these 4 areas of our life, you know, I want you to think about how we can grow, right? A little bit. I'm not asking, you don't have to grow by leaps and bounds. You just need to grow a little, right? So, you know, as I give you the scale of 1 to 10, 1 being miserable, 10 to be outstanding, whatever your growth is, right? Or bad, right? I don't want you to feel bad about the number you are. And if you're a 2, you're a 2. The point is, okay, that's where we start, and we're going to get to a 2.25 or 2.5. All right. So when it comes to the physical and you rank yourself 1 to 10, 5 being average, right? How are you doing with your exercise, eating right, putting right things in your body, right? Drinking enough water, getting enough sleep. If you were to average those out, what kind of number would you give yourself? Whatever that number is, that's fine, right? But what can you do to change something right now so you could start growing? Okay. The second number is the mental number, right? And what I mean is this: mentally, we have 2 halves of a brain. You know, my psychology thing is just wrapped up in my head all the time, but we are right brain and we're left brain, right? So we got to grow in creativity on the right side of the brain, but we also have to grow in logic in the left side of the brain. You know, a great way I always say is read a book, because that can work both halves of the brain, but so can, you know what, so does learning a new instrument or learning a foreign language or doing a number of things. The point is, be an active participant in your growth. Do not sit on your couch and allow things just to come at you and become just to think that you're going to be some sort of sponge and that's going to change you, because it's not. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the activity of your mental growth and knowledge and understanding of you and your world, right? Again, whatever the number is, it is. What can you do to change it? The third area is the emotional area. And look, I divide this up into 2 very small categories. Daniel Goleman, big psychologist who really understood the emotional impacts that have on our lives, right? There's really 2 things. He talked about emotional quotients, emotional intelligence, but really it's how well are you able to control your emotions under stress, under pressure, right? That's the first one. And the second piece is, how well are you able to truly tap into and understand the emotions of other people? Matter of fact, it's interesting because Traci is going to talk about how important listening is as part of freedom in our in our relationship with freedom at work, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself in your emotional area? And then finally is the spiritual. And I know a lot of people are really uncomfortable with the spiritual. I'm not anymore, because I realize that there's so much I cannot explain in the physical, the mental, and the emotional world. That there's things beyond me that science is never going to explain and can't explain. And there's also things that I know that I have faith in. I believe that there's going to be a tomorrow, even though I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I have faith in that. I believe that there are good things that are going to happen in my life, even though I don't know what they are. I just believe that, right? Matter of fact, on some level, I think when Traci talks in her book, I think there's this spiritual element that just says, she talks about gremlins, right? That sometimes we have these things that try to attack our soul with negative thoughts and pasts and mistakes that we've made, and that they're not mistakes, and that there's so many more. And it's really a spiritual element that exists. The other thing is true is, folks, that when things go bad, we run to something first, and whatever we run to first, that is our God. And then the other part of this is, the truth is, what brings you back to peace and center when things do go bad? Is that God? Is it meditation? Is it nature? Is it something else? Right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say your spiritual life is working, and what do you need to do to change it? Right? Those 4 areas are like the 4 legs of a chair. If the legs of a chair are uneven, you know what that is, right? It's bad posture over the course of time. By the same token, if your legs of your chair are too short, we can't eat at a normal table to eat the nourishment that we need to have. And speaking of someone who has her legs of her table all at the same right height, and they're all equal, her name is Traci Fenton. She's the founder and CEO of World Blue, and that is a global leadership company that teaches CEOs and top leaders how to lead with what she has trademarked as the proven freedom at work leadership model. She is globally recognized as a keynote speaker, author, transformational coach to CEOs and leaders, and that is all over the world, by the way. She's recognized by Inc. magazine as one of the top 50 leadership innovators, and honored as a Marshall Goldsmith Top 100 coach. She frequently speaks to top leaders and has spoken at numerous organizations. Here's just a few: Harvard, Yale, may have heard of those, Yahoo, U.S. Naval Academy. Yeah. Her work has been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Business Week, NPR, BBC, dozens more media outlets. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, and welcome to, for the first time, to A New Direction, Traci Fenton. Welcome, Traci.
Oh, Jay, thanks so much for having me. And I love what you said at the start of the show. I totally agree with all 4 legs of the chair. So important.
It is important, and it's part of your book. I couldn't help, when I read these books, I can't help but look through them. I go, oh my gosh, she's talking about the physical, she's talking about the mental, she's talking about the emotional. I think there's a little spiritual element in there too, right? And then there's a relational element, right? That I don't often bring up, but there's also a relational element that's so important to what we do here. So let's dig in right away, because the first thing is in the first chapter. I know you don't label them as chapters, but I'm going to talk about them as chapters.
Yeah.
And that is your first chapter, and it's on fear. And I thought this was so incredibly important, because I told you that when I read through this book and I was reading this book, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm not sure how this all can work, but the truth of the matter is, your chapter titled Fear at Work, and you ask a question right out of the box. You say, is fear rampant in your leadership style, your team, or your organization? And you challenge us to ask some questions. And then you give us some statistics about fear, and that CEOs themselves are afraid of being incompetent. We have people who are living in fear in work. So let's talk about the power of fear, and let's talk about how fear does not provide freedom at work.
Absolutely. I mean, when I've been doing this work for 25 years, Jay, and as I have worked with top companies around the world, teaching them how to lead and design their organizations on the principles of freedom and democracy, I kept wanting to go deeper and deeper and deeper and go, well, what is it that's actually stopping us from doing this? And so often we're dealing with the symptoms of fear. We see this in our workplaces, and we see this in our lives, where people are saying, oh, I have stress and anxiety, or we have bad communication, or we have disengagement, or whatever it may be. But really at the core of all of those things is fear. And fear is what stops us from being our fullest potential and unleashing the greatness of our teams. And I tell the story in the book of when I was in my mid 20s. I was feeling overwhelmed and very afraid. I was a full-time graduate student. I had started World Blue. I was working part-time for the NASDAQ stock market. And I called up a spiritual mentor of mine, and I kind of, barfed out my story to her of all the fear I was feeling. And she said, Traci, I have one question for you. And I'm like, what? And she said, so what would you do if you weren't afraid? What would you do if you weren't afraid? Which is not the same as what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail. It's what would you do if you weren't afraid? And in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh. Number one, I didn't realize how much fear I had. And number two, I saw instantly what I would do if I weren't afraid. And I just felt all of that fear lift off of me. And I had clarity. The fog lifted, the fog of fear that we get in. And I just knew how to take action. And I teach that question along with 5 questions, as you know, Jay, that helps us break through that fear, because fear is at the root of almost every single problem.
You know what? You make a point of this. I'm just going to throw out some of the things that you've written in the book. Fear kills good decision making. Fear kills bottom line growth. Fear kills productivity and engagement. And by the way, you give us some statistics. 14% of the U.S. workforce was actively engaged, which means that 86% wasn't. 36% employees identified as engaged. Fear kills innovation. Fear kills morale, agility, truth. And the list goes on, and you go in to explain all these things. But I thought what was really interesting was your definition of fear. And you gave such a simple definition. And it is fear, simply put, is a limited point of view. That got to me. Can you expand that a little bit?
Yeah, well, thank you. I spent a lot of time really trying to get clear on what my definition of fear was. And all of a sudden it just came to me very clearly. It's simply a limited point of view. A lot of times people think the opposite of fear is love. Well, really the opposite of fear is understanding. And so when we're in fear, statistically speaking, our brain shuts down, we become myopic, we can't see the full range of possibilities. So that's what fear is. It's all about limitation. It's a limited view of really what's possible for each and every one of us.
I think that's so important that because you do hit something that's so awesome in this. And when you use the word myopic in your book, yeah. I thought to myself, when we get caught into fear, what happens is we tend to shut down the periphery of everything, and we can no longer see opportunity, right? Because we're so focused on the thing that we fear most. And by the way, shame is fear, right? Because when we get right, the very foundation of all shame is fear. And because we don't, there's something about us that we don't want people to know, whether that's incompetence or something else, right? It's fear. And what happens is we just close down and we get so narrow that we no longer can see possibilities. And I just found that to be just incredibly freeing. And I hope, and I wanted to make a point of it because I want people, listeners from all over the world, to hear, right, that what you said here is that when you are experiencing fear and shame, you're actually limiting your options. You're not increasing them, because it's harder for you to do that. I just think it's brilliant. So kudos to you on that.
Well, thank you. And we have to understand too that, a lot of times people say, feel the fear and do it anyway, or make fear your friend, or people think, well, fear is a motivator to me. If I weren't afraid, I'd never get anything done. I'd never get out of bed in the morning. I'd never do whatever. No, we don't want fear to be any of those things. Fear is meant to be overcome. We're not meant to dance with it and walk with it. And obviously I'm not talking about the kind of fear that says, don't walk down a dark alley at night alone is, whatever. Right. I'm talking about the kind of fear that does limit us and limits our fullest potential. So yeah, Jay, you got it. Yeah.
I made the difference right away. You and I both come from the Midwest, and I know this is not exactly business radio, but I remember the chapter I wrote in my last book was called, sometimes you have to do things afraid, but we were on the farm and we had to castrate pigs. And I'll never forget the first day we had to do that.
Yeah.
You have to do that afraid. I'm sorry, folks.
Yeah, that would be.
There's nothing about that you can get your mind around to go, I am not going to be afraid. No, you'd say it, but that's not what she's talking about here. Though. Let's move to chapter 2, the promise of freedom at work. So what is freedom at work? I'm going to you ask that question. I'm going to ask it to you. What is freedom at work?
Yeah, freedom is the opportunity to live our fullest potential, purpose, and promise in our workplaces. Clearly, I'm not talking about anarchy. I'm not talking about a free-for-all, and to give a clear structure for that. But there are 3 pillars that creates a freedom-centered company: freedom-centered mindset, freedom-centered leadership, and freedom-centered organizational design. I'm sure we'll get into all of them, Jay. But that's how we get to freedom rather than fear in our workplaces, to produce a culture people love, but also pretty massive bottom line results.
Yeah, this is the thing. I'm just going to throw a few things that you say. Freedom at work addresses the root cause of a problem. It cultivates high performance. It develops world-class leaders. It's more than just something that you say. I guess the point is that it's a strategy, right, as well. Maybe let's talk about that as a strategy. Maybe a little bit. I don't know if we're going to develop that out, or maybe we talk about it here. It's up to you if you want to save it. But I mean, it really is. Freedom at work this whole idea is a leadership strategy. So can we kind of discuss that a little bit about what
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not just some, wishy-washy idea or sort of a general direction.
Right.
The book is actually a strategy, and it's a strategy that my team and I have implemented in hundreds and hundreds of companies around the world in every industry, from small to Fortune 500s. There's a reason why I waited 25 years to write this book. And it's because we've been doing this for 25 years. I was ready to write it 25 years ago, and it was a theory. Now it's a practice, And so as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as CEOs, we have to work strategically, and leadership needs to be strategic. And I happen to believe freedom at work is probably one of the best strategies out there.
I'm going to read you one of the most powerful quotes I've ever read in a book. We cannot rely on government officials to be the guardians of democracy in our world. Instead, as leaders, we can design our organizations, from businesses to nonprofits, schools to churches, to function democratically by teaching people how to be engaged democratic citizens in the workplace each day. By doing so, we weave democracy into the social fabric of our lives, which ultimately has an unstoppable ripple effect, building more robust and democratic communities and societies, and bringing more stability and economic prosperity to our world. Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I'm so glad that you touched on that point, Jay, because I don't know that everyone's sort of understanding this, but that's the point of the book, is where people understand we have to look to the way we run our workplaces, whether they're nonprofits or schools or for-profits. We can run them democratically and wake people up and teach them what the principles of freedom and democracy actually are. And like I said, weaving that firmer, more clear tapestry of freedom all over the world through our workplaces. People aren't learning it in the family anymore. Families are breaking down. People aren't going to church to learn these things. They're certainly aren't learning it in school, So more and more, we're having to rely on our workplaces and the leaders of our workplaces to really teach, quite frankly, freedom-centered and democratic leadership. So I think business leaders have an opportunity before them to say, I want to advance freedom and democracy in the world through business, and I'm going to use freedom at work to get there.
I think this is what the beauty is about this book, is that we're talking about a whole different way to run a business. And the more I kept digging into it, the more I kept going, wow. And I was blown away, because you even produced some results. You show in the book an average of cumulative 3-year revenue growth from companies you work with versus the S&P 500. Tell them what you found.
Yeah. And this was actually,
it's unbelievable.
I know. This is actually an independent study. So this isn't our own, tooting our own horn. We had an independent study done, and we looked at companies that are World Blue certified freedom-centered companies. So first we had to, create that group of companies, which we have done, and through a very rigorous assessment tool. And then they looked at how voluntarily those companies gave their financial information. And then we looked at how well they performed against the S&P 500. We had no idea what to expect, Jay. And we did this coming out of the Great Recession. And the punchline is that on average, companies that practice freedom at work have 700%, yes, 700% greater revenue growth over a 3-year period compared to the S&P 500. So this freedom and democracy, as we know, at a country level, when done correctly, produces tremendous results. And it's the same in companies. This is a competitive strategy for growth. And it's why we love to work with businesses because, gosh, I mean, I can tell you so many stories of businesses we've been able to take from zero. Story I tell in the book, we took one company as a spinoff from zero to $150 million sale in 2 years by implementing these democratic systems and processes. $150 million sale in 2 years. So that's the kind of results we can get when we understand what we're doing and how to practice freedom and democracy.
Here's what I'm going to say, folks. Bam. That's what I'm going to say. Bam. Right there. Her name is Traci Fenton. The book is entitled Freedom at Work, the Leadership Strategy for Transforming Your Life, Your Organization, and Our World. And you're listening to her here on A New Direction. Folks, listen, I got these two great sponsors, Epic Physical Therapy. You hear me talking about them all the time. Look, they are fantastic. They're my physical therapists. I think they should be yours too. Heidi and Andrew are awesome. They own it. And I got to tell you something. They have hired people with what I would say high worth. They know their worth. Yeah, that's a trick question. All right, you'll understand that later. But listen, I'm going to tell you this. When you walk in, they're going to greet you by name. They're going to be excited to see you, and they're going to design a treatment program that is specifically designed for you. It's not something in a box. It's going to be to find out what your goals are. Listen, they work with professional athletes. There's a reason why they go there. You should go there too. Check out Epic Physical Therapy. That's epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft and Team Realtors. You know what? For over 35 years, she's been helping people all over the world sell their home or buy their home. And the reason why she has been able to be so successful for more than 35 years is because she understands the power is not in selling or buying home. That power is really in understanding the people that you work with. And it's understanding that those relationships are so important because really this is the largest personal purchase you're probably going to make in a lifetime is your home. But really it's where the memories are going to be made ultimately. And she wants to be part of that with you. So when you're ready to sell your home, buy your home, start with the realtor that is called the legend of customer service. Start with Linda Craft and Team Realtors. You can go to lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here with Traci Fenton and her book, Freedom at Work. And I love when people just like throw down the gauntlet hammer and say, here, test me in this. That's pretty awesome right there. I want to stay in freedom at work. And I want to talk to you about the 5 stages along the transformational journey to freedom at work. And I think it's really important because I think I want to help people see if they can identify where they're at. Are you good with that?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, great. So stage 1, you call fear-based organizations. Give us an overview what a fear-based organization might look like.
Yeah, fear-based organizations are most organizations out there. It can be really pronounced fear where the leader is very clearly threatening or stripping away a sense of morale and worth of people because it's completely a fear-based environment. But it can also be really subtle forms of fear where people don't really know what's going on. They don't know, am I going to have a job next week? What's happening financially in the company, especially with the economy, what's going on? So from low grade to high grade fear, any organization that's operating in that way is going to be fear-based.
Okay. Stage 2, benevolent dictatorship. That doesn't even say, first of all, I'm going to just say something. When I first read, I had to read that like 6 times. Benevolent
Dictatorships.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Help us understand that.
Oh my gosh. I've had so many CEOs, Jay, through the years that I've talked with at, a cocktail party or a networking event. And I'll say, I teach leaders how to lead with freedom rather than fear. And they'll kind of look at me and wink and say, I'm more of a benevolent dictator. And honestly, those are companies, I don't want to say names, but companies that are like, we're going to still tell you how you need to think and what you're going to put in your body, but we'll give you free lunch along the way and you can bring your dog to work.
Okay. All right.
So
Okay.
there's a benevolent dictatorship.
Okay. There's a benevolent. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. The next one I think is just as fun. I don't know why. It's called stage three, the rich dad or mom.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the rich dad or mom who's like, the business owner, the business leader is like, they're not as controlling of their people, but they don't give their people, decision-making power or say in things or full information. But hey, like multiple times a year, everybody gets tickets to the ball game. And there's a great Christmas party and the company's doing really well, but the people don't have, there's no power to the people in that. But they get nice perks. So, that's the rich dad, rich mom. Yeah,
I think we see that one quite a bit too.
we do.
I think we do, especially in the small business. I work with so many small businesses. I see that one quite a bit. I think I see that one a lot.
Yeah,
All right,
it's not about perks. Yeah.
yeah, right. Personal perks, right? Okay. Stage 4, forward thinking models. Okay, now we're getting a little bit more complicated. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so there's some good models out there that are inviting companies to be a healthier work environment, to think about their people, to maybe give a little bit more power to the people. But they're not quite going all the way. They haven't really looked at the structure of the organization. So this, Jay, is when maybe there's still a bit of that command and control pyramid structure, but people do have a little, like they feel like they work in a great workplace culture, but they don't yet realize how much better it could be. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Now we come to stage 5, freedom-centered organizations.
Yeah.
Now you've given us 4. So have we talked about that enough, or did we have another? Can we open that up a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, a freedom-centered company is a company that does give power to their people. They're structured on democratic principles. They're not a command and control hierarchical pyramid structure in any way. It doesn't mean that they're flat. We're not advocating that they need to be completely flat. It doesn't mean you don't have a leader or a senior leader or a CEO. I'm the CEO of my company. We still have CEOs or top leaders or a business owner. But the entire design of the structure of the company is to give power to the people through systems and processes that release full potential, that release greatness, that helps the company completely go the next level. And over the last 13, 14, 15 years now, we've been certifying the most freedom-centered companies in the world. They're companies like WD-40, Wyden, Mind Valley, DaVita, Groupon Malaysia, Zappos. So companies all over the world, names you've heard of, but also many small businesses you've never heard of that have really figured out how to give power to their people through a democratic structure to produce incredible results. And that's what we're talking about.
That's awesome. All right. So now we're going to move to part 2 of the book. By the way, the book is divided up into parts, and what Traci has done here in this book is that she's divided the book into the parts, and she's actually, as I'm walking you through it, because I don't know how far we're going to get. I doubt we're going to get real far because there's so much to talk about. But the point is that everything has a logical step in the way that she's outlaid this book. So there is a point. The reason why we went through fear and we talked about freedom-centered work is because now that what she just said is probably challenging your mindset, because it did mine, right? Which is why we move into part 2, a freedom-centered mindset, and what I call chapter 3, shifting your mindset from fear to freedom. And so on page 27, you say one of the great myths on leadership is that your mindset does not matter. What matters is that you have the right skills, you get the right results, and you make money. But you say, in truth, everything starts with mindset.
Absolutely. Where your mindset goes, your life goes. I had a fun thing happen on this, Jay, just this past weekend. I told you I'm actually in Iowa right now visiting my family. I live in Florida, in West Palm Beach, Florida area. And I always have a habit of taking my niece, who's now 13, to the Barnes & Noble bookstore here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I get her a book when I come home to visit. And, she's through the years, it's been really fun to have that little tradition. And so my book just came out March 1st, and I went into the Barnes & Noble. I didn't know if my book would be there or not. And I went up to the information booth and I said, "Hey, do you have this book called Freedom at Work?" Long story short, they had the book. It was right there, right in the Barnes & Noble, and I happened to tell the manager who showed it to me, guess what? I'm the author. He asked me to autograph the book. I did, and we put it up. Now, I tell you this story because, Jay, for the last 25 years, I've walked into that Barnes & Noble and I have envisioned my book being on that shelf. And so to have that happen and to see it there, it was a pretty emotional moment for me. And I think what leaders have to remember is where we look is where we go, and so make sure you're looking in the right place because that's where you're going to go. And we have to learn how to control our mindset. We talked a little bit offline about entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur. I started my company when I was 21, sort of the original I was part of the original starting your company in your dorm room group before. That was really cool. And when you're an entrepreneur, you're building a company, you're constantly dealing with fear. You're dealing with the fear of financials or clients, or can I do it? Can we go to the next level? How do I handle this employee issue? How do I handle this customer issue? What about my competition? What about the market? So we really can't build freedom-centered companies until we as leaders first understand how to master our own thoughts and how to have dominion over the fear that tries to come in.
That's so beautiful. I love that. You continue on on this thought process. You say mental freedom is our surest path to human progress. When we overcome fear in our own thinking, decisions, and behavior, we can more effectively self-govern and help others do the same. And I think this is so critical to this idea of freedom at work, because this is a challenge. This is going to challenge a mindset. Right. I mean, it is a challenging mindset. It's not something that you're going to just immediately gravitate to, because we're so used to doing work in a particular way. We're so used to, if you're an owner or you're a CEO or you're a manager, you're used to doing things in a certain way. And your employees are used to doing things in a certain way. So wrapping our mind around this does require quite a shift, doesn't it?
Yes, well, because, think about it. Many families are run in a command and control way, and then you go to school, and schools are built on the factory command and control model. Majority of schools designed to kind of break the spirit and get you to be a certain way so that you're ready for the workplace. And we won't get into the history of schools, but that was part of the whole strategy to this. But I think, Jay, what's so fun is when people read the book or come to one of our global summits or engage with World Blue, people always come up to us and say, this is how I've always felt. This is what I've always believed in my spirit, that this is how we're supposed to work. And when I was just talking with one of our members the other day, who's the CEO of a very large company in Argentina. And he just finished reading the book. He's like, Traci, I'm from Argentina. I'm military. I served in the military. He's like, I'm reading the book. It is kicking my butt to think in this new way. But like you said, he's like, I know you're right. I know this is better. I know this is a better way. And so if you want to stretch and grow, this book is for you.
Yeah, no, it's really true. I told Traci how challenging this book was for me. I mean, it was a challenge, and it really was. And it is going to challenge you, folks, because it is a very different way. I'm telling you, it's groundbreaking, because it's a very different way of looking at how we run business. And yet she's got all the proof in the world that it works. You talked about the power question a little bit earlier. What would you do if you were not afraid, right? What would you do if you weren't afraid? And chapter 4, I call it chapter 4, the power question practice. It starts to ask us 5 key questions, right? One of which is, what am I afraid of? Let's talk about this, because I think it's important for people to kind of ask these 5 key questions, right? Okay, so the first one is, what am I afraid of? When you ask that question, what are you trying to get at?
Okay, so when I go through these questions with people, and your listeners can just kind of walk through with us, think of a challenge you're facing in your workplace, at home, personal, professional. And so that first question is, what are you afraid of? And, a lot of times people will say, well, let's take an example of a person maybe who has an idea and they want to become an entrepreneur and leave their career. They might say something like, well, I'm afraid I'm not going to be successful. I won't make enough money, or how will I support my family, or how will I pay the bills? So, but every single fear, and I've been coaching on this for so long, Jay, almost every single fear comes back to, why are you afraid? It's a fear of failure. It's a fear of what other people will think of us. It's a fear of death in some form, death of status, death of a certain lifestyle, death of what if my marriage fails if I don't, if I'm not bringing in the income like I did before. So what we're trying to get at is waking people up to really going, no, what is it you're actually afraid of? And I've seen so many light bulb moments just on that first question, Jay, and people go, oh my gosh, what I thought I was afraid of and what I'm actually afraid of are two very different things. So you got to go deep on it. But yeah.
You got to dig.
Yeah.
I think that was the big point is you can't look at the surface fear. You've got to dig into this one because it's the onion layers, right? You got to keep peeling it away till you get to the core of the onion where you go, oh,
exactly.
There's why I'm crying when I don't know I'm crying, right?
Exactly. That's exactly it.
there's the reason. Okay. Second question is, why am I afraid?
Yeah. What am I afraid of? Yeah. Why am I afraid? Then what am I afraid of? Like, what exactly are you afraid of? And again, now people are going, well, wait a second. Why am I afraid? I guess I'm afraid of what other people will think of me.
Okay.
Am I getting this wrong, Jay? What am I afraid? Why am I afraid? Yeah. Why am I afraid? Sorry. Which is, I'm afraid because maybe something that happened in the past or something that's going to happen in the future. A lot of times we're projecting stuff into the future, or I'm afraid because, my dad always told me I wouldn't be good enough, or what, and this is going to confirm what he said. So yes, I got that wrong for a second. What am I afraid? Then why am I afraid? And again, it's identifying those two things that are driving the fear gets us ready for the next question, which is
the power question. What would you do if I weren't afraid?
Yeah, what would I do if I weren't afraid? We call it the power question because when we're in fear, we're not in our power. We're in fear. And when we're in fear, we give up our power. We're not in a place of dominion. So the question becomes, so what would I do if I weren't afraid? What conversations would I have? What actions would I take? What strategies would I go after? What trip would I go on? What would I not do if I weren't afraid? So it's really getting at that sense of liberation and possibility of what you would do if you weren't afraid.
And you would think that you would end it here, but then you give us two more questions.
Mm-hmm.
And you take us another step beyond that and you go, okay. And I love this question because I love what you're trying to do here. How would I feel without fear?
Yeah. Yeah. How would you feel? And I love it when I coach people on this live, or I've done it in live trainings, and people are just like, oh, like everybody kind of sits back in their chair like, oh, I would feel so much better. I would feel liberated. I would feel peace. I would feel clarity. I would feel energized. For me, when I'm in fear, I lose energy. It's when I'm not in fear that I'm like, oh, I get my energy back, So yeah, how would you feel without the fear? Yep.
And then here's the fifth question. And I would have never asked this question. Okay. I mean, in all my psychological training, I've never asked this question, but I love it. It's a great question. Why is it okay to let the fear go?
Yeah. And I love that you see that, Jay, because I spent a lot of time on these questions, years, and I realized there had to be that one, because so often we tell people, just let it go, the song, right? Frozen, or just let it go. And it's like, I don't know about you, but I can't just let stuff go. I have to know when I'm letting it go too. So
Right.
why is it okay to let it go? For me, I'm a really spiritual person. And I answer that question by saying I can let it go because I believe, God, who is love, is in control.
Right.
Other people, maybe they don't have a spiritual path. That's fine. For them, it's more of a logical answer. Yeah, I can let it go because you know what? I'm pretty sure I'm not going to end up under a bridge. I'm pretty sure I can figure out a way to make this work or whatever. So it's really important to understand why it's okay to let go of the fear so that you can let go of the fear.
I love that. These questions are so imperative, I believe, to really getting us to the other side. And it's also critical to getting to freedom at work. I mean, it's kind of doing a little bit of a self-analysis of ourselves so that we can kind of free ourselves, so that we kind of free others. I don't know if that really made sense, but I really felt like what you have to do is you cannot expect to free anybody else up if you can't be free yourself.
Oh, absolutely. You have to master it yourself. That's why, like at World Blue, we have all of our leadership courses. One of our leadership courses is called a Fearless Mindset. And we teach people the power question practice. And then we invite them to practice it for 21 consecutive days. So when you have to pick a fear each day and go through the power question practice, it makes you so much more self-aware. And then as you become more aware and as you become more masterful of your thoughts, it makes you more compassionate towards others, because you start to see how often, especially as leaders, people are coming at you and they're angry or they're upset or they're stressed or whatever. And you're able to understand that underneath all of that is fear. And so you lead and coach in such a different way. And you're able to solve problems so much faster, Jay, when you understand at the core of it is fear and you stop slapping Band-Aids on stuff, on symptoms, and get at the core of it.
I love that. Her name is Traci Fenton. The book is called Freedom at Work, The Leadership Strategy for Transforming Your Life, Your Organization, and Our World. Available wherever books are sold. You're listening to her here, right here on A New Direction. Folks, listen, Epic Physical Therapy, they have multiple locations. Listen, they have the most cutting edge equipment. Some of my favorites, the Normatec compression sleeves, the anti-gravity gravity treadmill, they do cupping, they do all of a sudden I went blank because they do so many things. The truth of the matter is, listen, they do have everything available that you need to get you back to where you need to be. That's the facts. All right. There's a reason why professional athletes go, but they don't just work with professional athletes. They work with people like me who can't even remember all the things that they do. That's what they do. Listen, when you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, and your epic results, start with Epic Physical Therapy. It's epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft and Team Realtors. You know what? I'll tell you something about them. You know what? This is a challenging market. We all know that, right? This is a tough market for everybody to be in. Interest rates are starting to slide up some, and housing just doesn't seem to be available right now. Can I tell you something? She knows how to navigate that, and I'll tell you why. She started her business in 1985 when interest rates were 18%. You don't think she knows how to handle tough markets? That's when she started, and she's been successful for 35 plus years at the very top of her game. Listen, if you're struggling in this market, she's going to be calm, cool, and collected because she knows how to handle this market. And she knows how to take care of you and give you the right advice when it comes to buying or selling your home. So start with Linda Craft and Team Realtors. You can learn more by going to lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Traci Fenton, her book, Freedom at Work. I'm having a blast, Traci. I hope you are.
I love it.
I'm enjoying get to hear. I love when I have guests like you on and you're taking the book and I read the words, but then you're kind of expanding it out to me a little bit more. And I'm going, oh. And I'm chewing on it and I'm ruminating and thinking about, I got it now. Okay. I got it now, because I was like, maybe I'm not sure, but now I get it. And I love doing that with people like you on the show, helping me bring the book to life. And so thank you for doing that for me. Part 3. Freedom-centered leadership. Chapter 5, the 3 attributes of freedom-centered leadership. And I want to get right into freedom-centered leaders have high self-worth. And I want to get into that first. I know I'm bumping ahead, but I want to talk about self-worth because I felt like, which is the next chapter over, but self-worth, you call it love. I think it's chapter 6, love. And you said, I found that self-worth is number one determinant of a leader's success over the long term. You simply cannot be a successful freedom-centered leader without having high self-worth. And that's on page 50. So let's talk about self-worth, because this is a powerful notion for you. And it doesn't seem like we can go very far if we don't start there.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought up this. One of my favorite things to talk about. And it's, people have so many aha moments when I talk about this, or, they read it in the book or in any of our courses we teach, because, Jay, this, a little bit of the backstory for me. I remember when I was in my mid-30s, I was on a hike with one of my best friends, and we've been best friends since we were 14 and went to summer camp together and known each other a long time. And we're on this walk, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, she says, Traci, you don't have those negative thoughts going in your head, right? That are constantly telling you you're not good enough. And I looked at her, I said, what are you talking about? And she's like, those voices that are constantly like telling you you're dumb, you're stupid. I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course. I mean, I had no idea what she was talking about. And that began my journey, Jay, to really understanding the self-worth piece is something that so many people struggle with is loving who they are. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you have nothing to learn. But when you are comfortable in your own skin and you're secure in yourself and you love who you are, you're much more inclined to create an environment where everyone else can be at their best and shine their light. You're not threatened by that as a leader. And I go in depth in this in the book about some of those characteristics of low self-worth and of high self-worth. And time and time again, this is what we see. Those leaders who say to us, oh yeah, I want to create a freedom center workplace. And yeah, intellectually, I agree with what you're saying. But I talk in the book on a 1 to 10, where do you rate your level of self-worth and why? And the bottom line is ultimately every single one of us are 10s, I believe. And some of us accept it and some of us don't. But most leaders really struggle with this. I would say the majority of leaders we talk with would give themselves a 6 or 7 in their self-worth. And so we talk a lot about how do we bring that up? And then how is that impacting the way they're leading themselves and others?
And you talk about, by the way, throughout the book, she'll do like a summary chart of everything that she's talking about. Okay. And it seems like in every chapter of the book, and it's really cool. And she also gives, in every chapter, she's going to give you tips on how to do certain things and be successful in these certain areas. But one of the things in this area of self-worth, you talk about characteristics of low self-worth, is that we derive validation. Those people who are low self-worth derive validation externally, whereas people with high self-worth derive their validation internally. And I find this to be such a strong component of people evaluating them. When I hear people who are always focused on the externals, like, wow, man, I didn't get this done. I didn't get that done. I didn't get that done. Okay, that may say something about what you did, but it doesn't say who you are. And I think it's really important that we distinguish that who you are isn't what you do. It's really, you make point after point in the book about the mistakes that you made isn't who you are. You say that in the book. And then the other thing I've said to my coaching clients, and I know you said it to them too, is if you talk to yourself, if you talk to other people the way you talk to yourself, how many friends do you think you'd have?
I know, exactly. I went to about 10 years ago, Jay, as I was having this conversation with my friend and we were talking about this, I went to a leadership event with a major leadership speaker who everyone would know the name of. But during this 4-day event that I was at to sort of benchmark and see how he did what he did, at one point I was in a room of 4,000 people. He had the lights go down and he said, I want all of you to stand up, and at the top of your lungs, I want you to shout out all the horrible things that you say to yourself. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible. And I actually sat down in my chair because I don't say bad things to myself. I just don't, I tell myself good things. And everybody stood up. And for like 10 minutes, I just heard the most heartbreaking, horrible things being said. I had tears rolling down my face thinking, this is what people say to themselves? No way,
Yeah.
And so we've really got to stop this. I think it's, nowadays, I used to say this more lightly, but it's a pandemic. Low self-worth contributes to almost every single leadership problem we have, from small businesses up to the way countries are run. You can look at countries and see leaders who have low self-worth, and the way that they lead is not as effective as high self-worth leaders.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? When they start saying the things, it does it breaks your heart.
It does.
It breaks my heart to hear people say the things about themselves that they say.
Yeah.
Right? And you go ahead.
Well, and no, I'm with you. Sorry. I'm like, it's something I enjoy working on the most with our coaching clients is the moment when people realize, wait a second, I'm actually a 10. and own that and claim it within their heart, it really transforms your life. There's a sense of peace that comes over you, a sense of freedom, a sense of possibility. You see things in a whole new way. And that's where we're meant to be. We're not meant to be walking around telling ourselves we're horrible.
No, because we're not.
No,
We're
no.
not. We all have amazing potential and amazing beauty. We were all given amazing natural gifts and talents and abilities that are uniquely yours, and you're wonderfully and uniquely made. And when you say all these things, bad things about yourself, like I'm so stupid or whatever you're saying to yourself, what you're saying is that you're taking away from your incredible uniqueness and the creation that you are. And that just, it hurts me. I mean, I've done it in the past. I know how horrible that, I had to get to a point where I understand that my significance does not come from what I do. Right.
Not at all.
Right. And I don't keep, but I could go on that forever. But
Jay, can I say one more thing on this point?
Sure.
And I know I tell this story in the book. I tell this story in the book of, I was living in Washington, D.C., and I looked out my office window one day, and a bus goes by, and it had a Citibank ad on the side of the bus, and it was all white background, Citibank logo, and in giant black letters, it said, "You were born pre-approved." You were born pre-approved. And each one of us has to understand that, I believe, that we're born pre-approved. And some people listening to the show right now are going to be pissed. Can I say that on your show?
Yeah,
they're like, no, I'm not. No, I don't want to no, sorry. I disagree. You were born pre-approved.
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to take this one step further because there's something here that you say about our self-worth that I think is an important part of the Freedom at Work process. And that is hire people with high self-worth. Wow.
It's a game changer.
That is a huge, because what we try to do is we try to hire people with all these qualifications and all these skills. But if we just simplified it and said, how do we get at that? Help us get at that, because if you hire people with high self-worth, not cockiness, not overconfidence, because you make a difference. You make a huge distinction here between being self-confident and high self-esteem. And maybe you need to talk about that a little bit, because having confidence and having high self-esteem does not mean that you have high self-worth. So I'm gonna let you run with that. Right.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Self-esteem comes from the word estimate of oneself. We're not talking about what your estimate of yourself is. We're talking about the truth of who you are. Confidence is situational. I can be confident talking with you about freedom at work, but ask me to go fly an airplane, Jay. I'm not going to feel so confident doing that because I don't know how to fly an airplane. Okay. So self-worth is understanding our inherent value. And it took me a long time to figure this out. But now what we advise our companies on is, yes, we understand that when you're hiring, you need to look at skill set, you need to look at culture fit and all this stuff, whatever tests and everything people do. Fine. But the number one place you have to start, if you want to build a freedom-centered culture rather than a fear-based culture, is in your interview process. And we have many companies that now do this. You ask that applicant on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how would you rate your level of self-worth and why? You have to make sure you ask and why, because you're looking for an internal indicator. And people will sometimes say, yeah, but isn't everyone going to say a 10? And I will tell you, we do this for hiring. I have an entirely high self-worth team. Everybody on my team is a 10. It is such a joy to work with, Jay. You don't have to deal with drama. Everybody's a team working together. You don't have to deal with all the shenanigans of low self-worth. But people, we've had applicants come in when we've hired, well, people will say, well, I'm a 10, or I'm an 11 or whatever. But when they say, and why, it's all these external things. So we know that they're just, BSing us. They're not really telling the truth. So you really want to look for, we consider the high self-worth zone 8 or higher. Right. But really, ultimately, you want to hire those 10s. And again, it's not arrogance. It's not saying, oh, I've already got everything figured out. There's a real humility and joy that comes when people have high self-worth. That's what you're looking for.
I just found it to be brilliant. I really did. I just found the whole thing of self-worth to be brilliant. By the way, in this chapter that she has written here, she also talks about how to deal if like if you're making this transition for freedom at work, how to deal with employees that you have that are low self-worth right now. How do you deal with them? What do they need? And if you have employees that are high self-worth, what do they need? And how do you work with them? It's such great practical advice in dealing with both of these groups, because it's really, really important. Because if you're trying to make this transition into freedom at work, it's really powerful. Sadly, we have been on almost an hour, and it went by really, really fast. and so I'm going to have to ask you if you'd be willing to come back on the show at some point in the future.
Oh, I'd be honored and delighted, Jay. Absolutely.
To do some more of this, because this has been so good. We didn't get very far into it. And I really want to get into the 10 principles at some point, because they're so powerful and they're so rich. And I think they are so valuable, will be so valuable people. Let me ask you a question before you go, though. If you were to give people, based on your book, Freedom at Work, if you give people a new direction based on your book, what would be a simple little new direction that you would just give them as we're going away?
I love it. The new direction I would give them is know you're a 10. Start acting like a 10. Practice it. Even if you don't yet feel it in your heart, go out tomorrow and just go, okay, how would I think? How would I act? How would I communicate if I knew I were a 10 in self-worth? If I accepted that fact, and it would be a very new direction for many people that would significantly change the direction of your life. I can promise you that.
Her name is Traci Fenton. The book is Freedom at Work. I'm going to have a complete write-up with links to her website, links to the book. You can follow it at j@jizzo.com. Listen, you're going to be able to check out the book and get yourself a copy. I'm telling you, it's well worth it. And it is going to change the way you look at business. Evidently, we're bringing her back. So you can listen also for part 2, and you get a second chance. If you didn't buy it the first time, you can buy it the second time. Folks, this is the show. You know what I say every week, right? You are in control of 2 things in your life, and that is your attitude and your effort. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. You can always control your attitude and your effort. It's not always easy, but you can do it. Take control of them now. I'm going to be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great book. It's going to be another great show because of those 2 things. And as I say to you every week, you know what that is? Ciao, everybody.